What's the haps? I'm Morocco, and it's that time of year again. The time where anybody in this industry who has an opinion on video gaming is obligated to form a list and compile it into an article or video format for you all to consume that is all of the best video games, and indeed perhaps some of the worst as well, of the past 12 months. So this year I'm going to try and do it a little more professionally than I have in previous years. In previous years I've usually kind of integrated my gaming awards into other video formats that I've been doing at the time. But this year it is going to stand alone, so I'm going to present to you the Button Mash Video Gaming Awards 2016. So let's kick things off with a Best Visual Style Award, which I choose to go for in place of a Best Graphics Award, because back in the day, Games Awards, you always had a Best Graphics category, and it was, well, it worked once upon a time, but in this day and age, technology's kind of reaching limits as to how utterly fantastic things can be made to look. We see huge AAA studios throwing ever-increasing amounts of money at things to make things look better and better and better, and really the gains you're getting from that are just incremental at best. And honestly, I think I much prefer a really nice visual style. There are games that are not photorealistic, but still look gorgeous. They have a graphical style that works really, really well. Some of these games are made by, in some cases, with one person. These are tiny, tiny games with no budget, and as long as you've got a competent artist putting together a really good visual style, a game can look fantastic. The problem with this is that there are a lot of really, really talented artists in the world who are working in game development at the minute, and there have been a lot of really, really, really pretty games this year. So this was very, very difficult to choose. At any rate, my nominees for this category will be Light, Hyperlight Drifter, Gurgamoth, Firewatch, Fury, Valhalla, Burly Men at Sea, and Masquerada. There are some very, very pretty pixels in that list. Light, as well as Hyperlight Drifter and Valhalla, all had a pixel art style, which is... it's one of those styles that a lot of people maybe tend to sort of just file them all under the same categories, like, oh, it's a pixel art game, it's a retro-styled thing, you're going for the nostalgia factor, you're just going for retro points. But that's not always the case. Some games do it very, very badly. It's a style that's very easy to do badly. Some games just go for ultra simplicity and it just ends up looking crude, but then the flip side of that is that there are really, really talented pixel artists in the world who put together some utterly stunningly beautiful things with this really interestingly limited style, and I think the games that use it are all the stronger for it. There are some great styled ones, more so than what I had on the list, but I didn't play those games, so I shan't include them here. At any rate, of those on the list, I have opted for one that's not pixel art. As much as I do love the pixel art, I think if I had to be narrowed down, if I had to pick one out of that list, and God knows it's really, really difficult to choose, because they were all stunning in their own way, I might have to opt for Firewatch, just because that was a beautiful, beautiful world. Was it as cutting-edge photorealistic as a big AAA title? No, it wasn't. Was it styled in its own unique way that made it a very, very beautiful world to be in? It was very atmospheric. It was a joy to explore and see the world that's been created. My only regret was that there was not more of the world by the time you'd finished the game. Maybe the area you were given to work with maybe felt just a touch limited, but that is not an issue with the style itself. That is an issue that lies elsewhere and is not within the purview of this particular category. So in terms of visual style, yeah, I've got to give it to Firewatch, but all the other games on the list, very, very commendable in case you want a treat for your eyeballs this year. Moving on from treats for the eyeballs onto a different type of sense, let us move on to the music, the sounds, the things we heard this year, the best soundtrack of the year. To again compare this to more standardized formats within games awards, a lot of awards often seem to pick out licensed soundtracks, and I don't know, I guess licensed soundtracks can work well, but I feel if you picked out music that was written for an entirely alternative purpose and just repurposed it for your game, it loses some of the impact, as opposed to a game that has a score or soundtrack, whatever, however you want to define it, written explicitly for that experience, tailored to that experience. The experience is so much more, so I do prefer to go for an original soundtrack kind of thing. There were two main standout things this year that really jumped out at me in terms of audio. The runner-up in this category I'm going to give to Valhalla. Valhalla is a game that I'm going to be talking a lot about today, if I'm honest. Valhalla, hey, I was hyped about it for 2 years because I knew it was going to be good. It kind of did not disappoint in any way, shape or form. That was a fantastic game through and through. And particularly the music. The music was great. I mean, we actually, to be fair, heard a lot of the music back in the preview. They did reuse it because, hey, the game just has a jukebox and you put music on the jukebox, right? But there were some tracks I didn't enjoy in there, but there were a lot of tracks that I really, really enjoyed. And they all worked really, really, really well in the context of the game. In spite of it, again, just being, here's a track list, and pick out some things, and put them on the jukebox, and then we'll just listen to them. And you might think that would be a little bit hit or miss based on sort of the theme, the conversations, what's going on in the world. Maybe your music choices might not always work out. I don't know, it kind of more often did than did not. Generally speaking, a lot of the music works really, really well in the context of whatever's going on in that bar, which is actually pretty surprising. So yeah, kudos to them for pulling that one off. The winner though, I'm not sure anybody else is particularly going to talk about, but for me, in terms of music, it left an impact. It was probably the one soundtrack I downloaded the tracks from so that I could continue listening to them outside of the game quite a bit. It was a very, very catchy one. It is Death Road to Canada, which was a kind of silly chiptune-y thing. It was bizarre. It almost didn't fit the game, but the game itself was very, very silly, so it entirely worked. It is a phenomena unto itself. I'm genuinely at a loss for how such a bizarre, silly, strange chiptune soundtrack works in the context of a zombie apocalypse and still manages to be bang on. Utterly, utterly nailed it. Loved that soundtrack, loved it to death, played it long beyond stopping playing the game. I kept listening to the soundtrack, and that is why that wins Best Soundtrack of the Year for me. So next up, we're going to take a look at the Best Narrative Experience, which sounds like a fairly pretentious way of saying Best Story, and in a way it kind of is, but for me I would say the Best Narrative Experience goes beyond that. It's everything that is built around it in the world to build upon the story that is presented to you. The story itself is core to the thing, but the experience can be more than that, and there are a lot of games that kind of did that well. Some noteworthy mentions, definitely Orwell. I loved Orwell. Orwell was a great story. Kind of just delivering the game one day of the game world at a time, delivered to you episodically over a period of 5 weeks. That sat really well with me. I liked receiving it in that format, and it's really, really on point. Politically so relevant to the world we're in today. It's absolutely something you must check out if you're in any way politically interested at the moment, I would say. It is one of those games where I'm not actually sure if your choices actually make a significant change to the world, if you have any real impact, but they feel like they do. You feel like your actions within this dystopian future world really, really matter, and that's very, very important to a story. If you feel like you are genuinely shaping the world through your actions instead of simply following the given script, that makes a really compelling story. Further to that point, Sorcery 4 was also released this year, which a little bit of me really thinks this could be the best story of the year. I think there was slightly better, only just, but slightly. But Sorcery 4 was excellent. This also gives you a lot of choices that genuinely impact things, and things that are relevant to you, things that you decide in the first game come back to haunt you in the fourth game. You can pick up and play the fourth game standalone, but Sorcery 4 is the culmination, it is the pinnacle of everything that has been built up in this world. If you make decisions and choices and acquire items in Sorceries 1 through 3, they will impact you in Sorcery 4, and they will be very, very important to you, and they will change the world in a way that you can see, you can know the impact you've had. And that is so fantastic an experience to have. It's Probably one of the best story. It is the best story I've ever seen on a mobile game, because mobile games do not generally excel in that area. It is available on PC as well, but I don't know. I actually think the game really excels on mobile. So if you're looking for a great story on mobile, that is a franchise, and specifically that game, you need to check out. But it becomes so much more than everything if you play the whole thing together. So, very, very highly recommended in my book. You owe it to yourself to be checking out everything Sorcery. But Sorcery 4 is just... it is the best, because it is everything that existed before, built upon, and made so much more than the sum of the whole. Masquerada! Can I say Masquerada? Am I allowed to include Masquerada? Can I tell you, I haven't finished it. Does that disqualify me from including it? I don't know. I mean, it's a game that I'm dying to finish. It's just one of those things that I never find the time or energy to be able to do so. It's a game that I've loved everything about that I played so far. As a narrative experience, it is great. There's a fantastic story. This doesn't, unfortunately, go into the previous category where I've said, I like choices that impact things. Okay, we're not making choices that impact things. We are following the script here. We absolutely are. But the script is so good. The world building is so extensive. You don't have to invest yourself in all of this, but the gameplay by itself probably wouldn't stand up on its own. The world building is what makes this. There are things to find everywhere that tell you the story of the characters, of the world, of the events, of everything. The developers have spent so much time really fleshing out the world of Masquerada that you really, if you like a good story and like a good world to immerse yourself in, there's a lot to be immersed in. It's good. I like it a lot. My winner is one that I absolutely do want to say has a narrative experience more so than any kind of real story. It's a game that I gushed about when I was playing it. It's a game that I gushed about for a while on Twitter after playing it as well, because everybody has a different experience. This is a scripted thing. Everybody's playthrough will be more or less the same. You will start in the same place, you will finish in the same place, you will encounter a lot of the same noteworthy plot points, but everybody's interpretations and what they take from it are so very different, because everything's done visually. I speak, of course, of the final station, which it was very, very, very light on the very explicit narrative. Very little was actually ever told to you, but so much of the world was just shown to you. You just saw pixel art interpretations of events that were going down, and sometimes there was a little bit of ambiguity as to what was going down, what was the context here, what actually had unfolded in the scene that we're viewing at. And the attention to detail in the world was fantastic. There was a letter you found from a woman who thought her husband was cheating on her because he went out every night and she didn't know where he was going, he didn't say. And that was it. That was just a little bit of side note. You just found this note and you're like, oh, this is domestic troubles. Okay, what is this? But if you explored a little further, there was a little hidden room in the world where you found that in the basement, behind basically a secret door that presumably the wife did not know about, the guy had this whole art gallery where he'd been learning to paint, but he was clearly too shy to share his art with the world. He didn't want anybody to know about his art. So he had this secret art studio where he painted every night and hung his paintings up on the wall, and the room was just filled with his artworks, but he didn't want anybody else in the world to even see them. He didn't even want his wife to see them. This was just this little side thing, but this attention to detail, these details are what made this world so beautiful, so great to be a part of, and it made for a more fulfilling story at the end of it. At the end of it, you got this experience where you're like, not everybody saw this the same way as me. There was this, again, in the last level, a minor spoiler, I suppose, but it is, again, sort of incidental to the story. There's nothing major going on here. There was a room above a kind of a music studio where some guy had been pursuing a solo career, and he was not doing very well. And again, we find a note where the wife's like, I'm leaving you. The neighbor is more successful. I'm leaving you for the neighbor was basically what was implied. And you go around to the neighbor's house. You can walk through their house as well. And you go down into his basement. And other people picked up on the fact that the other guy was a much more successful musician. I was like, oh, he's got gold records on the wall. Oh, she's left him because he's got more talent. No, there was, again, minor pixel art detail. Very difficult to pick out, but To me, it looked a lot like the guy had hooked up a lot of microphones to the wall and was basically stealing the poor guy's music and making a mint off of it, which was a very, very interesting way to look at the world, which for some reason nobody else ever seemed to pick up on. A lot of people looked at that and were like, oh yeah, no, the other guy's more successful. It's like, I feel like my interpretation of this world's right, but it's not the same interpretation anybody else got. And that's beautiful about this world. So, again, that's a great story you should absolutely check out, because your experience will be different to mine, because it is delivered in such a unique, fantastic way. Best mobile game. Okay, there's only one. I've already gushed about it. Do you want me to gush about it again? I will gush about it again. Sorcery 4 was the best mobile game that was released this year. I didn't play many others, but Sorcery 4 was definitely the best. Of all mobile games, I don't care. I don't know what you're going to offer me as a counterpoint. It's not better than Sorcery 4, I can tell you that much. Sorcery 1 was a very, very solid swords and, surprisingly enough, sorcery style choose-your-own-adventure novel. It was good. It was not incredible, but it was very, very good at what it did. Game 2 introduced time-traveling mechanics and a really cool dice minigame. It just built upon the world and made it much more interesting. It set it in a very different style. You could loop around, you could retrace your routes a little bit, and again, it had this whole time wibbly-wobbly mechanic thing going on, which just made the whole game a lot more richer. By the time you get to the third game, they've introduced open world mechanics. You could friggin' walk around that thing however freely you want, and they still managed to make it work as a really interesting choose-your-own-adventure narrative experience somehow. That's a friggin' achievement if ever I heard of one. I don't know how you could even begin to do that, but they did. This was an open-world choose-your-own-adventure novel, and I don't know, you just need to let that particular expression sink in, because how does that work? I don't know. It did. It really, really did. Again, you've still got all of everything that went on before. You've still got lots of cool, interesting time-faffing mechanics going on, as well as kind of two worlds intertwined going on as well. Sorcery 3 was great. Sorcery 3 was definitely, at the time, the best of the franchise. But then this year comes Sorcery 4. Sorcery 4 builds again on top of everything else. We're still doing excellent, high-quality swords and sorcery. We're still playing quirky dice games with strangers wherever we go. We are now seeing the consequences of all the decisions we've ever chosen. Things that happened to us in Game 1 come back to revisit us in Game 4. We're still faffing around with time. There are elaborate curses to be broken that you don't really know the consequences of or how to break, and there's a lot of very much experimentation that's very, very serious in this world. And just the sheer amount of times this game has utterly, utterly surprised me with something that's happened. Every time I feel like I've got a handle on Sorcery 4, every single time it throws something entirely new at me that makes me stop and go, okay, now I need to entirely rethink how this world works, because I hadn't expected this. This changes everything. This game has just been turned on its head. How have they done this so often? It's incredible. You need to play it. Best expansion to a thing! Okay, kind of a crap category, but I did it last year. I liked having it in my awards last year. But then this year, actually, I can't think of many games that I played that actually have had an expansion to them. So I guess by default, that kind of falls to Hearthstone, simply because they consistently pump out pretty damn decent expansions to things. Right now, the Mean Streets of Gadgetzan thing came out not all that long ago. I'm really enjoying that expansion. I like playing with the Jade mechanics, just being able to summon huge battalions of crazy minions, and watching people flounder at countering it. It's a very cool expansion. I like it. Karazhan was also... well, actually, it wasn't as good as I wanted it to be. It was very good. There was a lot of nostalgia involved, but they also made it weird in some places. I don't know why I had to fight a fork. That was very strange. But at the end of the day, yeah, Mean Streets of Gadgetzan is pretty damn good as far as expansions to things go. So, since it's probably one of the only few expansions I played this month, yeah, that's by default, go have that. Best support for a thing that came out before. I suppose in some ways that kind of sounds like an expansion, so could that be rolled in with the previous one? Sort of not. Insofar as a lot of games also just put out DLC these days, which are just not expansions. Expansions are major content for something. Expansion is a large chunk of stuff that's added to a game that completely overhauls a lot of things that make it a new experience. Support for a thing that came out before just implies that you have continued working on a product that did not come out in 2016 to a point where I'm very, very appreciative of what you did. Mostly, I've made this category entirely for the purpose of pointing at Party Hard and going, look at what they're doing, they're still making new levels for that thing. I did not expect them to be doing that, and the new levels they're making are really, really good, if kind of hard in some places. They are really, really good and really cool. I think maybe now they actually have finished it, but honestly, at launch, I thought they'd finished it then as well. So who knows what we're going to see. So yeah, we've now got Party Harder / High Crimes, whatever they want to call it. The press release has always called it Party Harder, which I quite liked as a name, but the game calls it High Crimes. And then there was the whole weird Van Helsing thing that they did as well, which was just unlike everything else in the game, and one of the biggest levels they'd added to the game, and it was free. And again, I don't think anybody expected them to make this, so just out of the blue, boop, here, have some really fantastic new stuff. That's just great. I love it. Party Hard gets a prize for that one in my book. The anti-game of the year, which is to say the worst game I played this year. Which at this point means we're now taking baby steps towards actually telling you what you probably wanted to hear, which was Game of the Year. So we're going to get there soon, but first, let's talk about Push the Crate. Did you see the live stream me and Tulkas did of this? There is a highlights video on my channel. It's, in both mine and Tulkas' regard, probably some of the best content either of us have made. Probably the best content the pair of us have made collaboratively. It was phenomenal in its terribleness. It was visually pretty poor. It was probably just an asset flip if I actually knew much about what assets were available in... Was it Unreal or Unity? I'm not sure which. I'm not sure it matters, but whichever storefront they used, I'm pretty sure they flipped a lot of assets. There was zero animations involved, really, for the most part. The character just kind of... He just sort of moved. I'd like to say he glided around, but he didn't even really do that. If he pressed forward, he just kind of teleported forward a square, and so did the blocks. It didn't really do anything at all in that regard. It was visually disastrously bad. It was buggy as hell. You could sometimes, for no obvious reason, just push blocks 2 squares. We called it a critical push, because that's the only thing I could possibly describe it as, and there was no rhyme or reason for it. It did break the game in a lot of ways, and then there were actually some levels where the level numbers were fundamentally broken. So, to such an extent that I'm pretty sure that's the reason the developers just made all 100 levels in the game unlocked by default when you buy the game. So that, you know, if you reach the bit where the game progression is actually genuinely broken, you can just click on the next level and do it anyway, because that was a thing that was in there. The whole thing would actually genuinely have worked better as just a very, very cheap, simple, throwaway 2D puzzle game. I know they didn't sell it for much anyway, but as it is, it's one of those games you can point out that illustrates the point of why Steam needs proper, human-operated curation systems in place to stop trash. Because it was trash. That's what it was. The You Tried Award for Effort. Beholder, let's talk about Beholder. I dearly wanted to like Beholder. The premise of Beholder was great. It's set in the same kind of space, I would say. It's not in the same world as, but in the same space, mentally speaking, as something like Orwell. It also came equally at an appropriate time in the world, politically speaking. It would engage with a lot of people at this point in time. The mechanics were pretty solid, I would say. It seemed like they had a great concept going on there. The art style, definitely interesting, but the progression and balance were utterly balked. You couldn't make any progress. You couldn't get much beyond the tutorial before the game just threw insurmountable fees at you that if you didn't pay them, the game quickly quickly killed you and ended the game. It was like, okay, you failed to pay bills, so this sequence of events has culminated in you dying or something, or being arrested, one of the two. It didn't end well for you most ways, which in a really dark, depressing, dystopian world is like, yeah, okay, I can actually see how that might actually be the idea, but you never really got the impression that that was actually the idea. It was more of the game's kind of screwing you over here. I actually have heard that they fixed a lot of that after launch, maybe even upon launch, but certainly the press preview builds which were sent out, and was the version that I played because I was doing a preview of it. That version was not good. Not good. Did not leave me with a good taste in my mouth, so you guys, you tried. You tried. And to be fair, I still think they're going to do well because a lot of people played it after launch and it maybe wasn't as broken and actually might have been kind of fun. But for me, because I got that bad experience, because they didn't, for some reason, until the game actually launched, bother to even think about people's experiences while playing it and just threw weird, silly, insurmountable goals at them, that just ruined the whole thing for me. Sorry guys, you tried. Shall I keep you waiting on Game of the Year a little bit longer? Yes. Let's play the best MMO of 2016 game. Actually, to be fair, you know what? This year was pretty poor for MMOs, at least as far as the ones I played. I guess Blade and Soul was probably the most solid of them all. It had a very, very good combat system, which is more than most of the others had. It had a, it didn't blow me away visually compared to any of the others, but neither did any of the others, so of all the MMOs I played this year, Blade and Soul was the best. Just because, actually, I kind of did have a blast messing around with that combo system and just being a general badass in combat. That was pretty fun. That was alright. Just shame about everything else the game had going on, which was just, typical fare. I suppose the other genre of my expertise would be shmups, so let's do the best shmup of the year. I suppose weirdly enough I would say that actually my best shmup of the year wasn't really that much of a shmup. That you were shooting, but in a twist on the formula, you didn't aim. Seraph I played a lot of. Seraph I played a very good amount of. I got really into that game. They've got this daily mission system that keeps you coming back, and it gives you rewards in your main story progression that makes you more powerful in the story. So you're doing daily and weekly missions, gives you power across everything that you do within the game. And then, if this wasn't enough to keep you going, there's also, again, on top of that, kind of a prestige system that lets you prestige up to 5 times, which, again, slowly but surely increases you in power as you go, making each subsequent run through the game even more powerful. So there's a lot to see and get involved in Seraph. I liked Seraph a lot. The best multiplayer experience. I would love to say Battleborn for this. I loved Battleborn, but I'm going to have to give that the runner-up position, because the winner is Paladins. Do I actually love it as much as Battleborn? No, I actually genuinely don't, but the other side of it is that I actually cannot love Battleborn anymore. There is no option to love Battleborn anymore, because Gearbox screwed the pooch so goddamn hard on that one that I am actually kind of left with no other option but to settle for second best, which in this instance is Paladins. And frankly, I don't give a damn what everyone else on the internet says. I just genuinely didn't really get into Overwatch. I didn't enjoy it that much, so I really didn't play it. And finally, the Game of the Year! I've kept you waiting long enough. Honestly, I did want to do a best single-player experience before this, but I did realize that, 90% or more of everything that I played this year has really, really been single-player stuff, so frankly, anything I would be gushing about in best single-player experience was just going to be repeated in Game of the Year. So let us, without further ado, without keeping you waiting any longer, without delaying the inevitable, talk about the Game of the Year. I told you what this was going to be when I played the friggin' game. I knew it was probably going to be this from 2014 onwards. It was Valhalla. For God's sake, it was Valhalla. That game, man. It has everything. It has waifus. It has booze, which I love. It has great writing. It's got a fantastic story. I love that story. It has a great soundtrack. We've already been over that. It is the second best soundtrack of the year. It has a great pixel art style. Again, it is not the best of the year, but it is top-notch nonetheless. And it does actually have replayability, which find me many visual novels that have a whole great deal of that going on. This has, aside from multiple endings and things, it also has Game Plus mode. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. I do need to play a lot more of this. I played through it the once, obviously, on the channel. I have not played through it again since. When I go home to my parents for Christmas, I will be replaying this at home. I need to play this again. And I'm thinking it should run on my laptop. So yeah, I need to go through that whole thing again, and I will. It's gonna be good. So 2016 has been actually astonishingly excellent for video games. There's been a lot of really, really good stuff. But as we always tend to do, we shall end these things looking forward to the future. Let us have the ones to watch in 2017. We have A Hat in Time, which was funded on Kickstarter a few years ago and was basically promising to remake Banjo-Kazooie. So yeah, that's supposedly out in 2017. Liking that. We'll look forward to that a lot. Halo Wars 2 is supposed to be out. I don't think I'm going to have anything I can play that on, so maybe I need to buy a thing I can play that on, because I loved Halo Wars. I would really dearly like to see Halo Wars 2. I'm on board with that one. I only recently found out while looking at lists of what's coming out in 2017. Apparently Freedom Planet 2 is coming out in 2017. I didn't know that. There's a trailer. It looks amazing. Go and check out Freedom Planet 2. Oh my god. You need to check that one out. Oh my god, I need to see that one. It's gonna be great. That should be great. I honestly didn't think they'd actually totally finished working on Freedom Planet 1, because I thought the talk thing still needed to be fully implemented and whatnot, but okay, I'll take Freedom Planet 2 as well. It sounds pretty great. Pyre, the new game from Supergiant. I played a demo of that at PAX. It is pretty top-notch and solid. It's great. Those guys, they do make great games. They made Bastion. They made Transistor. This is also going to be great. You know it will be. Pyre, one to look at. Red Dead Redemption 2 is out. I did really like Red Dead Redemption 1. I don't know what they're going to do with this. I've not really followed it that closely, but Rockstar usually do some pretty solid stuff. My only problem is that there's this lingering concern that they may try to turn it into this open worldy kind of free to play, but not really, because you still have to buy the game kind of model that GTA 5 did. I don't really want to see Red Dead Online. Red Dead, they had a multiplayer mode before and it didn't work particularly great then, so Red Dead Online I can't see being a thing I would want to play, but I would play a Red Dead Redemption 2. I want that, yes. The Return of the Obra Dinn. I don't know if this has a release date. This is just optimism in my part. I checked out the development on that. I was like, where is this game? It has been in development since May of 2014. The developer at the time when he first announced the game was like, yeah, this should take me about 6 months tops to actually finish it. I think I then covered it in December of that year, more than 6 months later, as part of my Advent of Indies at the time. So that was already past schedule when I took my very, very, very early look at it. The game, as far as I can make out, is still coming along nicely, but 6 months was an interesting estimate on the developer's part, because we're still here. We're at the end of 2016, and it's I don't know where it is. I don't know where it is, but I want it. I would love it to be next year. It would be great if it were next year. Greedy Guns is also something that's ticking along nicely. Funded that one on Kickstarter, covered it on the channel, enjoyed the hell out of it. That's going to be a really good game, I think. It's also going to have co-op on it, and I think I would love to be able to play that co-op with someone. Whether I can or will remains to be seen, but yeah, it should be pretty damn good. It's cool. Jenny Leclue, Detective Vu is another one I caught at PAX. Is also looking to be a really great game. I think they are aiming for 2017 on that. So that's on my list of things I'm keeping an eye on. And top of the list, to take a step right back to the first item on this list, we got a similar kind of Banjo-Kazooie thing, because Yooka-Laylee is also out in 2017. That one actually has a release date. I think it's April 11th or 12th, 2017 is actually the slated release date for Yooka-Laylee now, which is interesting because they've turned that around in a lot shorter span of time than A Hat of Time did. Well, I guess they probably have a bigger team working on it, but at the same time, interesting that it might actually genuinely, probably will, come out before A Hat in Time now. But either way, I still want to play both. I love Banjo-Kazooie. 2 Banjo-Kazooie-like games in this era are okay by me. I'm on board with that. But yeah, Yooka-Laylee, top of the hype train on that one. I will play that on my channel. I will love it. It's going to be great. But that kind of wraps things up for here today. Thank you for joining in these experiences with me. Some of them I have shared on the channel in previous times, but some of them I have not. Sorcery 4 I have not ever shared on the channel, so you should just go and experience in that one for yourself. Other things you can go back and rewatch and try and understand why I love them so. But even if you don't, you should really go and play all of the things that I mentioned. Just go make a shopping list, go buy all the things, go play them. You should do that. But I'm going to leave that there for now. Thank you for joining me, thank you for watching, and here's to 2017.